All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Talkin Investing. You are here with Tom and George.
Is that just? I thought it was Tom and Jerry. Oh no, I'm George. Right.
That's a different.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
Another tough week. Another week that started rough, and we tried to scrape our way back. So today was a mixed bag. We'll take a look at what happened today, what happened with this week, and I want to look at what is happening with Bitcoin overall and the Bitcoin miners overall. We're asking the question, is the bull market over? Is this a crisis? Is the world in crisis? The amount of fear, uncertainty, and doubt right now is off the charts. So I think, we got to talk about what is going on, how it's affecting Bitcoin, how it's affecting the Bitcoin miners, how it's affecting our portfolios, how it's affecting our lives. So as always, we have a lot to go through today. So welcome. If you guys could do a favor and hit the like button, it does help the stream out in real time. We are getting record low numbers. The last stream that we did was the lowest amount of viewers in 4 years.
Well, I know why, Tom.
And it felt, go ahead. Why?
You know why? Look at this,
because of the misery.
Yeah, and I don't think it's over with.
Right. It's been, if you're in particularly Bitcoin miners, and for those of you who are regulars with us, we talk about the Bitcoin miners more than anything else, but we do, talk about Bitcoin a lot, as well as all the major events that are affecting the market. But if you're in the Bitcoin miners, we're going to go through the numbers. I'm going to give it a few minutes, let people get in and join the stream, and we're going to go through the numbers. 2025 has been a disaster. It's been a disaster versus my expectations thus far. It's been really a disaster by any measure. And 2024 was a mixed bag. Depending on which Bitcoin miner you held, it was pretty much a letdown. 2023 was phenomenal. It seemed like this bull market was off to the races. The Bitcoin miners were up insane, 400, 500, 600%, all of them. That was 2023. Well, 2024 was a mixed bag. I thought we had taken a year to cool off, and 2025 was going to be better. And, at the beginning of the year, we talked about kind of giving it 90 days to assess what's going on and take another look and see what we think. And when you always got to be checking in regularly. So we're almost 3 months into the year. It's been, I don't want to call it a train wreck, but, this has not been
I would call it a train wreck. It's pretty close to one. I think it's a slow moving train wreck. And I'm in to the point where I'm in. There's nothing I can do. You know what I mean?
Well, I know. And I've been talking to, I try to talk to as many people as I can. And I've got all different kinds of opinions. I know personal people that aren't worried at all. And they just feel like this is.
Well, Tom and I were talking after the last show, and we were like, we got to start talking about other things. Other areas in the market, but I have a feeling that the next 3 to 4 months is going to get brutal in the stock market. I think maybe it's me.
This short-term prediction game is just it's brutal. It's been a failing proposition. The market is very volatile. Although I'm going to show you some signs. The volatility index is pulling back to a more normal level. There's some stuff that looks like we're stabilizing, but we've got more going on in the world, right? And the bottom line was, a lot of this stems from the presidential election. We have a change in, from a Democrat to a Republican, and the new president is quite aggressively trying to implement an agenda, and it's a domestic agenda. It's a foreign agenda. It has to do with trade. It has to do with businesses. It has to do with taxes, and it's creating a massive amount of fear because we don't know, how long these things are going to last and where they're going to end and who they're going to be good for, who they're going to be bad for. Everybody may have their own opinion, but the market, while they linger out there, I would say the number one thing affecting markets, and I'll just preface this by saying I don't think is going to ultimately make any difference at all. But the number one thing affecting the world markets is the uncertainty surrounding tariffs. And I'm telling you, 6 months from now, that's not going to be a top 10 talking point. But right now, it rules the day, and it's chaos. What do you think, George?
Well, it's funny you say that. I don't even. That's part of it for crypto. I think the other part of it was it kicked 3 months later into July of the iOS 222 or 2000, whatever it is. They kicked that down until July something. I don't know what the date is. That was supposed to go live yesterday.
So what does that do?
That allows banks to start to custody crypto.
Okay,
Start
so
to use crypto as their means of exchanging funds from market to bank and market to market.
so that will be a gigantic catalyst. But here's the thing. So they did kick it down the road 90 days. And so we got to ask ourselves, because one of the things people are sick of hearing is, well, we just got to wait a little while longer.
Oh yeah.
But there's a valid reason right there. You know, there's a catalyst that was going to occur, and now it's going to occur 90 days later. So, you know, as we reassess, that's just one thing, but it's a big thing. So I tried to make a list in my mind. I should have made a spreadsheet on the computer. What are the biggest catalysts going on in the world right now? And then underneath that, I put which ones of these are directly affecting Bitcoin or directly related to Bitcoin. And it's really none of them. So Bitcoin suffers the wrath of the volatility of all of this uncertainty, but all of the conversely, if you were to make a list of catalysts, good or bad, for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, we're going to go through some big ones today. If you make that list, it's basically all positives and no negatives. So that becomes the question, you know, has the narrative changed? Have things fundamentally changed? And is the bull market over? So, you know, we're going to talk about that obviously as the stream goes on, but
does anybody follow the wallets of Bitcoin miners to see who's selling and who's buying, and if it's certain large wallets that are just going back and forth, or is it actual, you know, different wallets, over, you know, thousands of wallets that are being used? That would be a good question.
well, I'll tell you, this isn't the exact question you're asking, but let me.
But here's one of the things for a catalyst for it to play out. It just hasn't played out in our favor yet. There is going to be a Bitcoin, quote unquote, war, so to speak, between China, Russia, and America. And you can already start to see it unfolding. You know, the United States says they have 190,000, and then China says they have 198,000, and you know Russia's getting into that game too.
So that's a catalyst, right? We just established we're going to have in the US a reserve for Bitcoin. A stockpile of some other cryptocurrencies. That is kind of a little more elusive at this point. That hasn't been defined, but we have an executive order for a Bitcoin reserve, and we have legislation going through to potentially talk about buying, you know, 5% of all the Bitcoin, or about 1 million Bitcoin, the United States to hold in reserve. There's lots of other legislation going through, and there's lots of changes happening at the SEC. So as you list them all out, I'm just hard pressed. I would like anybody to put in the chat what you think a negative catalyst is for Bitcoin right now, other than the fact that everybody says, you know, we're all screwed. That's kind of the generic catalyst is, well, the economy's screwed, the world is screwed, so Bitcoin's gonna tank.
Right, you mean the fundamentals of Bitcoin haven't changed as a stored of value.
Exactly. And any changes that are happening are really as far as the eye can see, as I can tell, are going to be for the better. So
I do think that, like on Cash App, it did peak and go down, the Lightning Network. The adoption has slowed down.
on the Lightning Network for pay.
Yeah. Yes.
So you got to put that in the negative column if that's true. But I would also say I think that the very smallest, I would be hard pressed to say 1 in 100 people invest in Bitcoin because they think it's a form of currency. That might be more like 1 in 10,000 people. Now, if you happen to live in, El Salvador or something, that's a different story. But as the general population, like that's not really Bitcoin's use case.
They haven't even talked about that. They haven't. I'm pulling it up. 40 million users, Lightning Network. That was supposed to be the big thing. Year over year. This was October 22nd, 2024. Year over year, they're saying that it has grown. But the problem is, I don't think that's the case this year.
Well, when was that article?
This was October 24. Last.
Well, all right.
5 months ago.
That's a long time ago now.
Yeah.
So what I was going to show you, to go back to what you were talking about earlier, Bitcoin network hash rate inches higher. The U.S. listed miners, so the publicly traded miners, the ones that are on our list, plus a few more. Actually, they use almost the exact same list we do. Represent around 30% of the global hash rate. So that keeps inching up, which means, our basket of stocks that we're looking at are 1 month at a time keep increasing about 1% to have more of the overall total network, which means, the more of the network they have, theoretically, the higher percentage of the Bitcoin that they should mine accordingly. So that's good news. They're talking about the fact, essentially, the Bitcoin economics has gotten worse because the Bitcoin network's gone up 2 exahash per second, which is immaterial. That's a margin of error. It changes triple that sometimes in one day. But the price of Bitcoin dropped. So obviously Bitcoin economics has been down recently. However, somewhere in here, it talks about, I can't find it, I'll just tell you. See it popping out of me, but the U.S. publicly traded Bitcoin miners now hold, for the first time ever, over 100,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's the sum total of the U.S. publicly traded Bitcoin miners, not publicly traded companies. The Bitcoin miners hold over 100,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So it is clear to me that the Bitcoin miners are not. They don't have a negative sentiment, right? They hold by far more than they've ever held.
I'm just really trying to take the 10,000 foot overview look of it, Tom, and try to understand, with all this good news coming about Bitcoin miners, why they're destroying it. And my only answer is that they know they can't stop what's coming, and they're going to try to make you pay the pain for it.
And this is typical. I'm going to go back to the Bitcoin chart. So nothing here, just to see what's going on. So we closed the week just around $84,000. Let's put up a poll. Poll number 1. Let's just get right to the question. Let's see what you guys think. We asked this on the members only. So I've got 2 polls in a row that we can do that I'd like to see what the general population thinks versus just the members.
Tom, from MicroStrategy to 20K, Tom, public miners are cooked. Too much completion from foreign deep pocket actors.
Well, like I just said, everybody's saying, well, there's too much competition from here and there and this and that. But we just look, JP Morgan puts this out every month, every single month. This is like 12 months in a row. The U.S. publicly traded companies have a larger portion of the total global network. So they're not getting this market is not getting flooded with outside players. Could that happen? I don't know, but it's not happening right now. What's happening is the big companies are getting bigger, and we know they have big growth plans again. We have two companies. We have Iron planning to get from 31 to 50 exahash in the next couple of months. So, we've got a lot of growth left in the publicly traded companies. So I would say wait and see. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that, but JP Morgan puts out the numbers, and the publicly traded Bitcoin miners keep getting a larger and larger and larger percent of the total global hash rate. So as long as that's happening, they should be winning. Now, obviously, all the other things considered being the price of Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is kind of down, sideways and down lately, right? We were as high as 109,000 and we're at 84,000. So from peak to bottom, we got exactly a 30% pullback. We're now down around 23 or 24% off of our all-time highs from a few months ago. But this is a very natural, for those of you who have been here, and I know that's most of you, this is a very natural part of the cycle. Last year, we had 5 20+% pullbacks, one of which was over 30%. So this is standard operating procedure. So I'm going to ask the first simple question. Do you think the Bitcoin bull market is over? And let me see if I can go to an article. Here. Bitcoin's bull market cycle is over. This is from CryptoQuant's CEO and founder. Bitcoin bull market is over, according to CryptoQuant CEO Kai-Young Zhu, who predicts a 6 to 12 months of bearish or sideways price action due to declining market liquidity. CryptoQuant reports suggests a possible return of Bitcoin to $63,000. So 6 to 12 months. So 6 to 12 months, a return to $63,000. I don't even agree with that, but what I would pose to that is, does that mean the bull market is over? Because that's not a 70 or 80 or 90% crypto winter like we've had in all previous cycles. So that's another question we're going to talk about. It could be we're nearing the end of this cycle situation, and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are going to behave differently going forward. This very predictable, very similar cycles we've had. Maybe we've reached a level of maturity, particularly in Bitcoin, where things are going to be a little bit different going forward. Vote if you can vote. We got right now, this is a runaway in one direction, but let's get some votes. And also, of course, if you just got here or if you have not yet, if you could please hit the like button. It does help the stream out in real time, so it is much appreciated. Thank you, Pogo. Pogo said, please smash the like button for Tom. Appreciate it.
Hit it.
Robert Anderson. So we're going for 100 likes. We've never failed. We just crossed 40 right now as I'm watching. So help us.
Help you.
Robert
Anderson.
Anderson.
This has been brutal.
Oh, we are right. We're along, and I'm going to kind of show some charts as to just how long they've been bringing the pain. And the thing is, in the middle, so for some of you, and let us know in the chat if you're one of those people, if you've been swing trading, like I suspect the hedge funds have, you're minting money right now. But if you're buying and holding and dollar cost averaging in, this has been exceptionally painful. It's been much longer than I think most people expected. We're still technically really not outside of one standard deviation outside of the behavior of Bitcoin miners from previous cycles. And that might sound hard to believe, but right now is when they need to run. 60 days from now, if they haven't run, then we may be multiple, we may be radically behind all the other previous cycles. So, and that doesn't mean that they won't run after that. We don't know. And, I think we all agree, there's a lot of manipulation in this space, and it's very hard to determine. You've got CleanSpark at close to 30% short interest. CleanSpark is not trading on its fundamentals. CleanSpark fundamentally, in my opinion, is probably the strongest Bitcoin mining company out of all of them. They are the only Bitcoin mining company that is a 100% pure play on Bitcoin. They don't do anything else. And
a few people have said this, Tom. They said that the volume was 76 million shares today in CleanSpark.
let's go take a look.
Pogo said it was 3x the normal volume.
I mean, 3x is a lot.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, they don't have an at-the-market offering, so it's not because they issued stock. They don't even have an at-the-market offering. So we don't have to wonder if they issued stock. We know they didn't issue stock because they don't have one. So I don't know why. Let's look right now and see if we can get to the bottom of why.
The new drugs I'm on must be doing really well because I'm not nervous about my investments in the Bitcoin miners at all yet.
Fresh, here we go. So yeah, average 23 million. Today's volume is 76 million. But let's just take a quick look at whoever brought this up. Thank you. This is a good point and it's worth looking into. Let's look at historical data and see if we've had days like this. I think that one of the things is the average for these companies trading volume daily is going down and down and down and down because interest has been lost big time in these companies.
And it's down. Oh my goodness.
So you got to go back to February 7th. So a month ago, we had a day of 57 million. Today was 76 million. I'm just seeing if there's other days that were like this.
Well, they're pretty big on inside. Oh, I can't say that.
61 million on December 18th, 69 million on December 13th. So 71 is still reigning supreme, 68 million. So several times they've hit 68 million, but I'm back, 6 months now and I don't see volume this high. So something was going on today. and CleanSpark was down 4%. So, it wasn't a good day. And it was down 2.5% with a few minutes left in the day to go. So it did sink at the bottom of the day. Yeah, that's a huge amount of volume. That's a good point. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe we'll find out. But, I would submit to you, CleanSpark is now a $2.08 billion market cap company. I mean, they are ranked number 2 basically across the board in every measure. They have the second most exahash. They mine the second most Bitcoin. They're in the top 3 efficiency. They're in the top 3 in amount of HODL on their balance sheet. They are in a very good spot. They're operating at a very high level, but they went from, by the way, they were the most beloved Bitcoin mining company 6 months ago, and it wasn't close. We would do polls. What's the best bargain? CleanSpark would win those in a landslide. And now, for whatever reason, they're just hated. They're just, right now, today, they are hated. So I suspect that will change. And for most people, it's going to change after they're going to chase, right? This will bottom out. It'll turn around. It'll go up. And obviously, I'm not stating facts here. This is what I believe, because at these prices, at this market cap, I mean, these guys have 11,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They have an extremely strong balance sheet. They have over 40 exahash of Bitcoin mining capacity. They mined over 600 Bitcoin last month. I mean, they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, and they're they're laser focused on efficiency and growth. And they're laser focused on Bitcoin mining. And that is clearly out of favor right now. So, the fact that they are the only pure play Bitcoin miner is probably one of the reasons they're getting beat up so badly. People in general seem to think the market, the retail investors, have abandoned this, forgotten about it. And a lot of people think this is a failed business model. We'll ask you guys what you think about that as well. So do you think the Bitcoin bull market is over? 30% say yes. So this is very, very close to what the members did. I think the members ended up, and it just clicked to 29%, which is where I think the members were at. So I'm going to end that one to ask the next one, because there's a little nuance to this, a similar question. So 71% think, no, there's still good times ahead. Almost 30% think the bull market's over. So I'm going to ask the very same question, and thank you to the member who recommended this question. I don't remember who it was, but because I think it's an important distinction. Okay, so this one is, do you think the Bitcoin miners bull market is over? So it was about 70-30. We think the Bitcoin bull run's not over. But how about for the Bitcoin miners? Robert's saying, I honestly wonder how some of you make money. You don't buy dips, but seem to buy tops. So that's true for some people, Robert, but I can tell you I know a lot of our members buy the dip. And, I will say there's fatigue because, we're on round 50 of buying the dip with these Bitcoin miners and with Bitcoin. And, still Bitcoin, if you look at Bitcoin, it's well above its previous cycle high. So even with this pullback, we're now at 23-24% pullback. That's very, very typical. I don't think too many people are upset about that, but it's the performance of the Bitcoin miners. HIVE, for instance, is down 94% from its 52-week high. So there just doesn't seem to be any sense to that. And there's several Bitcoin miners most of the Bitcoin miners are down 60 or 70 or 80, some in the high 80s off of their cycle highs from this cycle. So these stocks have been absolutely beaten up. They've been shorted. In particular, CleanSpark, Marathon, Riot, and TeraWolf have been extremely shorted, between 25 and 30%. But most of the other Bitcoin miners have a pretty serious short position as well. At some point, these guys got to decide, we made our money. We shorted CleanSpark down to $7. Do we really want to risk? Are they going to get it to 5? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. Pogo's saying, I own HIVE. I cry every day. I know. It's inexplicable. HIVE, I want to look at HIVE for a minute because, this is shocking to me. And it makes no sense. So this is why, if you don't think the bull market is over, and then I'm going to show you an article, a press release that HIVE put out this week. So let's just take a minute and look at HIVE, if that's okay. George, do you own any HIVE?
Yes.
But you did get in, to be fair, it was...
Yeah, I got in really low. It's probably up. I won't look, though. Did you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
I'm not looking. I don't want to know, guys. At one point in time, it was a very healthy number. Now?
Okay, so since November, HIVE is down 70%. 70% since November. But if you go...
I bought it in January, right before they made that announcement. And then they had a pop.
So in the middle of the crypto winter, there was a nice run up. So you think this looks like, this must be HIVE's all-time high. No, This was just a pop they had in the middle of the crypto winter. Their all-time high, 28. They're at $1.66. Okay, and there was a stock split in the middle, but it's adjusted for that. So what I want to show you guys is this was the bottom, December 30th, 2022. So if you guys remember, November, December, Bitcoin double bottomed, and in the last week of December, all of the Bitcoin miners hit their new cycle crypto winter lows. That was the low of the low, and every single Bitcoin miner was down in the crypto winter between 91 and 99%. So this is HIVE down somewhere between 90 to 99%. This was the bottom of the crypto winter. They're only a few pennies away from where they were at the bottom of the crypto winter. Now, since then, they have replaced basically every single machine in their entire fleet, right? And they just put this out a few days ago. HIVE Digital Technologies completes acquisition of Paraguay site, expanding mining capacity by 317%. They're currently at 6 exahash, and this gives them the ability, they're targeting getting to 25 exahash in 2025. So, that's a quadruple from where they are right now. Now, are they going to have to raise money to do that? Is their stock too low? Are they going to get to some other number in the middle? I don't know. But, they've already dramatically increased the efficiency of their fleet, and they continue to grow their fleet, even if it's at a slow and steady pace. Is this a company that should be at its low from the bottom of the crypto winter? In other words, HIVE is at the same spot it was when Bitcoin was at 15,000. There may be some of you who say, okay, well, that makes sense to me because I think HIVE is awful and they're going to fail. So, if that's what you think, then this makes sense to you. But if you think they have a business model that can survive and at some point thrive in a thriving Bitcoin environment, right? If you still think Bitcoin's going to 150 or 175 or 200, then, in that case, I think you're going to see HIVE, they could get this is the stock. This is the highest risk reward stock. Now, there's several stocks we're not following anymore. They don't put out monthly operational reports, and they are now micro cap, nano cap stocks. In other words, their market caps of $5 million or $10 million. So we've knocked those off the list. The ones we look at, this is the lowest market cap, and it's dropping by the day. So let's just take a quick look. HIVE is now $257 million market cap. So that is the smallest one that we look at on our list. And Marathon is the largest one that we look at, and it is $4.2 billion. So that's a massive discrepancy. But these are two very, very different companies. So the question is, do you think that HIVE is a $200 million company? Do you think they should be at their, lows from the bottom of the crypto winter? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I will tell you, I bought on this round of the dip to who was it? Who was it that just said? Was it Robert that said, I don't know, buying high and not buying the dip? I just bought options this week, and I've waited. I'm trying to be patient for the reason that, listen, this is the 50th dip or the 60th dip, right? I mean, how many times can you buy the dip? But I will tell you what I did this time around is I bought January of 2026 options. So I bought $1.50 options for HIVE for January 2026. And I bought $1 options for Bitfarms in January of 2026. I bought both of those in the 30 to 38 cents range. So, is Bitfarms going to be at $1.38 at the end of the year? Maybe. I think it's going to be at $3. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. How much more uncertainty is there in the world, right? There's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on that affects things that can delay and change the cycle. we've never been at this part of the cycle. The other thing that's different is the economy, right? Bitcoin's never been around in one of these raised interest rates environment when we go into a halving and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of economic conditions that are very dissimilar to previous cycles. Having said that, the Bitcoin, I would still argue, is still following reasonably along with previous cycles. So I don't think we're outside of that yet. I know people are panicking. I know that because at one point we reached 10 on the fear and greed index, which is deep into extreme fear. We'll take a look. That's gotten a little better. We're at 31 today. We got to 49. Yesterday, we were almost neutral on the fear and greed. So this is how much this is the level of volatility and uncertainty. We've been in extreme fear, and neutral all in the last 2 weeks. And in 2 days, we went from one day, from yesterday to today, we went from neutral, almost exactly neutral, 50 is exactly neutral, to 31 fear. So the volatility is real. We talk about this nonstop, and it's because this is the most volatile place in the stock market. Right? Cryptocurrency is wildly volatile, and the Bitcoin miners are even more volatile. So this is tough space to trade. We're at 70 likes. Thank you very much, everybody. If you are here and you have not hit the like button, it does help the channel out a lot. It helps the stream out a lot. Let's get people here. Let's talk about what's going on. And with that, let's get to some of the numbers. Let's see what the Bitcoin miners and Bitcoin did this week. I will tell you, Tuesday on the live stream, and this is like 3 Tuesdays in a row that have been a nightmare. So there was an article that said Tuesday is the most volatile day for Bitcoin over the last quarter. That could be coincidence. Who knows? But for whatever reason, on our members only live stream, it's been a kind of a bummer lately because every Tuesday seems to be a train wreck. So we started the week way behind the 8 ball. So let's take a look at where we finished. Okay. So this is from last Friday to this Friday. This is what Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners did this week. So you're going to see in yellow, Bitcoin was down 1%. So with all the ups and downs, and this is to George's point. He pointed out, I think, on last Friday's stream, they're popping us between 80 and 85,000. Now, this time they actually dragged us all the way up to 87,000. So whatever you want to say, they keep dragging us up and down inside a range, and they're churning and burning. And if they're buying and selling at the bottom of the top and the bottom of the top, they're making a lot of money. And George has done some of that.
Yeah, right? I almost did it again, but I said, "Oh, not this time, Tom. It's gonna go. It's taking off." Where do you think Bitcoin needs to get to see a healthy return for the miners to start profiting again, to have a positive return? You see what I mean?
I think
95,000, 100,000.
There's
new all-time high.
Right. There's a few thresholds. I think so. Let's go to the 1-day charts, and then we'll come back and take a look. So this is this week. We're going to take a look at a bunch more numbers in this, but you can see there were 2 Bitcoin miners in the green this week. HUT was up 2%, and Riot was up 2%. Iron was down 1%, tied with Bitcoin. Everything else, some at the bottom here. Bitfarms, another horrific week. CleanSpark, another horrible week. So Bitfarms down 9%, CleanSpark down 7%, Marathon down 6%. I will tell you, I hold all 3 of these, not financial advice. I just telling you, these are 3 of the 7 positions I now have in the Bitcoin universe. And these are my older ones and bigger positions. And, this was a very bad week for them. So let's go to the 1-day chart because, I think you're going to see.
Bitfarms. That's because it's high. What does that mean? What, they're down 9%? They announce probably, that they finalize their deal and they go down 9%.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we're gonna talk some Bitfarms because they had a couple of big press releases this week. First, I want to get to Old Jock member for 25 months. Thank you very much. Old Jock said Trump's so repulsive he's turning everyone off crypto along with Tesla. Along with Tesla's, I don't know what that means.
Tesla, no, I don't know. Tesla is. Oof.
Well, we're going to talk about Tesla as well. That was one of the things on our list for today. So Old Jock, not a fan of Trump, clearly. JD, who's a member, said, sold all my Bitfarms to companies circling the drain. So I have to say, as you guys know, and listen, this is a space where sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree, sometimes we're going to strenuously disagree. I know a lot of people think that I'm out of my mind holding and buying into Bitfarms, but I feel pretty confident about Bitfarms. I did notch them down. They were one of my highest level convictions, and I moved a couple of companies ahead of them, but the more I see them do over the last 3 monthly operational reports, I'm beginning to get a comfort level back with what they're doing and where they're going. I think they adjusted their plan, and I talked about it on this channel. With their stock as low as they are, they slowed down their growth. Instead of trying to get to 35 exahash this year, they're going to try to get to 21 exahash this year. And I think that is very smart because the last thing they want to do is dilute their stock at $1, right? They're going to have to do 100% stock dilution to get the growth they wanted. So they said, all right, you know what? We already got enough money to get to 18 and then 21. Let's just get where we're going and not sell our stock at $1. So I applaud that. I think that was a smart move on their part. It's unfortunate. It would have been nice if their stock was performing properly and they could have been keep rolling. But on top of that, what I will say is, for all the crap that Bitfarms takes, they increased their exahash in 2024 by 97%. That was 5th best out of all Bitcoin miners. So the problem was they said they were going to do a lot more than that. So the market's punishing them because they didn't hit their goal. And that's fair because they said they were going to get to 21 exahash and they got to 12.8 exahash. But understand, that was basically a double. So they doubled their exahash. That was the 5th most out of any publicly traded Bitcoin mining company. So they had a good year, but they fell well short of where they said they were going to be. They told us very late in the game that they were going to miss the mark. So they made a lot of missteps. 2024 was not a pretty year on the business side, not on the operational side, but on the business side for Bitfarms. But I would contend I still have a high level of conviction. Again, not financial advice. Bitfarms has gone nothing but down in a straight line for the last year. So buyer beware. But I've been dollar cost averaging in again.
Well, this is a little thing that happened to me this week. It isn't about Bitcoin. It's about XRP, of course.
Yes.
But I had to give somebody $10,000. I owed him money, right? So I said, oh, well, listen, I'll just do a wire. That $10,000 from Bank of America cost me $30 to transfer.
$30 wire transfer fee.
And I asked ChatGPT how much XRP would it cost me. And basically, it was 0.0005 cents.
So nothing.
So it's nothing, basically. Then a gentleman, I went to a restaurant and he charged me 4% of a $40 bill. It was like $1.47. And there's another use case for crypto too. Oh, okay, Pogo, I will. I'll resend it. But so adoption's coming for crypto.
everything that you look at says adoption is coming. And again, if you guys see things where you think there's some signals out there that are bad for crypto or for Bitcoin, drop it in the chat, but not wild theories and speculation. In other words, like as we go through this channel, we try to just talk about the facts. So we look at articles, we look at what Congress is doing, what the president's doing, what the SEC is doing, what the Fed is doing. We look at the data that comes out. So, that's empirical data. It's not really opinion. Obviously, we all also give our opinions on what we think about all that. But, give me, if you think there's something negative going on, give me some hard, concrete evidence that something out there is negative in regards to the adoption of Bitcoin in specific, because that directly relates to where Bitcoin's price is going in the future, right? It's a supply and demand situation. We know Bitcoin's supply is fixed. It's 21 million, but it's really more like 17 million because there's about 4 million that are lost. And when they're lost forever. So we know the 21 million or 17 million, however you want to count it, we have a finite supply. Almost all of that is issued, by the way. Over the next 100 years, they're only going to issue a couple, less than 2 million more Bitcoin. So we're way more than 90% of the supply is already out there. So there's a very fixed supply and the demand continues to increase. We'll look at the ETFs because they've done two things that I think are very telling over the last month and a half. And I think they're a signal, but again, no one thing. I don't like to look at any one thing because, all of a sudden tomorrow's front page could dictate the entire, tomorrow's the weekend, but Bitcoin's 24/7.
I think we pretty much prepared everybody last Friday for this to be the case for the next 2 weeks because nothing's going to change in this quarter. I mean, this is chalk it up for a win for the hedge funds.
Right.
But they're not going to have 2 negative quarters in a row.
That was both of our opinion, is that
Right.
We're still in for some more short-term pain. But, but that doesn't mean I'm selling. I dollar cost averaged in. I'm doing that at a lot slower pace than I used to, right? Because this has gone on way longer than I expected.
And it could go all the way till July, right?
It could easily go into the summer for all we know, which is frustrating. And, you want to hear everybody. We could go cheerlead and rah, rah, rah. But the reality is, we got to look at the trends. We're 3 months into going sideways. This is the one I'm looking at the most that really, and again, I don't look at any one thing, but if you look at the sum total of things, but I am going to put a little bit of a bullish case together that may start 2 to 4 weeks from now. So there's 2 things happening. This is now the Bitcoin 1 week chart. Actually, there's several things happening on here that I would like to go through. But first, our sponsor, if you could please smash the like button. We're at 80 likes. We're going for 100. Thank you guys very much for the 80 likes. It is much appreciated. 100 does help out a lot. So pardon my own interrupting myself. So what I want to show you guys on this is number one, and we've been talking about this for months now. There is a bearish, these white lines, we set a higher high with Bitcoin. This is on the 1 week time frame, and a lower high with the 1 week Bitcoin RSI. That is a bearish divergence, and 1 week is a long-term period of time. So you can expect that to play out over a considerable period of time. You can see. So we've had this happen before. So simultaneous with this bearish divergence, which you now see right from this top, right from this higher high, we did a little sideways and then down, right? So this has played out exactly as we expected. And it's exactly when we started talking about it. I always held out hope. There's so many different things you can look at. I held out hope this would not be the thing that prevailed, but things started to pile on top of each other. Then we had, on top of the bearish divergence, we had a bearish crossover on the MACD on the 1 week time frame. That has been 7 weeks ago now. So bearish crossover, you can pretty much count on some bearish activity for Bitcoin. You can see on the 1 week time frame, these can last anywhere from a month and a half to 3 or 4 months. Now, you do not have to get all the way back to a bullish crossover to get moving in the right direction. So if I look at the last time we had a bearish crossover, this lasted like 3 months. So we're only 7 weeks into it right now. Now, it doesn't have to last 3 months. There is no rule, right? This is where we're at. And we're picking up, if you look on the histogram, these red is very bearish, pink is less bearish, and the length of these, they keep getting longer and longer. So this has been some serious bearish momentum for the last 7 weeks. But if you look at the last time we did this, let me get rid of all that nonsense. We got the bullish crossover right here, which is right here. But the bottom was right here. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks up and then 2 weeks sideways. So we had 6 weeks of decent price activity before we had a bullish crossover. And then once we had the bullish crossover, we skyrocketed to a new all-time high. So I think that's the path we're on. I think that's the journey we're in the middle of. We're playing out this bearish crossover. We're playing out this bearish divergence. But on the flip side, 2 more things to look at on this chart. On the flip side, I've got a line here at 44.82. So, obviously that doesn't have to be precisely there, but roughly on the weekly RSI, that goes all the way back to January of 2023. So that was over 2 years ago. We have bounced off. Every time we get there, we bounce off of that line. Right? So I drew this before this happened. So all this price action played out after I drew this line. And you can see we got right down and bounced exactly off of this line. And now we are starting a recovery. So, I don't know. Here, you see, we had to bounce around a couple of times before we got going. So I don't know if we're going to keep bouncing around for a couple of weeks. That's why I say there could be 2 or 4 more weeks left of pain in this. But I'm looking at this line holding. And the other thing I'm looking at on the 1 week, I have different lines of support on my 1 week than I do on my 1 day chart. This was a very clear line of support. And let me just gray mark. This $80,400 we drew based on this weekly candle closing back in November. This weekly candle closed at almost exactly on March 3rd. This line held almost perfectly. Then we went up from there, opened and closed above this, opened and closed above this 2 weeks in a row. So this, there is a possibility. You're now several weeks into a pattern here that says we might hold this line. It doesn't mean we won't candle wick below it, but if our weekly candles keep closing above this line, maybe this is the line of support. I do have lower lines of support, so it will not shock me if we get down to, if we get under 80, if we get to 76,000, if we get to 73,000. It wouldn't even shock me if we get to 69,000. I will tell you, I don't think we're getting to 62,000, and I have a line down here at 54.7. Those are the nightmare scenarios. They could happen. I can't rule them out. That's not what I think is going to happen. But there's a lot going on this 1 week, and this seems to be dictating, in my mind, this seems to be holding truest to its form. And this little pull, couple of weeks of green, if I go to the 1 day, we had on the 1 day chart, we actually had a bullish divergence. So subsequent to that, you can see we've had some bullish activity. But that is typically much more short-lived. A daily, a bullish divergence on the 1 day is a short, so that's a little short-term momentum inside of a longer, bearish pattern that's playing out, which is the 1 week bearish divergence. So I know this is a lot of technical talk, and a lot of you may not care at all about the technicals, but for whatever the reason is, oftentimes Bitcoin does follow the technicals. But I will also concede that clearly, with a new president, with news coming out every day, I know the tariffs made people insane, and we're not done with that. So, it was the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off, the tariffs are doubled, the tariffs are off, the tariffs are on. So I get it. That is the ultimate uncertainty. And in the short term, it's driving the market crazy. I want to show you, we just avoided something. Find this. So this was an article from 7 hours ago. And I saved this 1 hour before the market closed. And this says NASDAQ at risk of 5-week slump. So we haven't had a 5-week slip in the NASDAQ. In other words, that's 5 red weeks in a row. Same thing for the S&P 500 as well. We haven't had one of those in 2.5 years. However, if I go over here, you're going to see this is the S&P on the 1 week. So this candle's now closed, right? Because the trading week is over. This is green. This was red almost all day today. During the trading day, this was red 90% of the trading day. If I go from the 1 week, you're going to see, if I go all the way down to the 15-minute, this skyrocketed in the last 15 minutes of the day, and that candle right there avoided a 5-week in a row slip in the S&P 500. If I go back to the 1 week, so my point is, it's not just Bitcoin that's going crazy. The market is very frustrated and going crazy, right? For most of the day, this was 1, 2, 3, 4, and this was the 5th week in a row. This was hanging out down here most of the day. And then in the last 15 minutes, it went on a rally and turned the week green. So, that avoided a 5-week. And for whatever it's worth, my point is, it's not just Bitcoin that's struggling. The market is struggling to find its footing. The Fed came out this week. And I think Wednesday was a good day in the market, and it was a good day in Bitcoin, and it was a good day in the Bitcoin miners. In fact, I took a screenshot just to in remembrance, because we've had so many red days. Everything seems like a red day. We do have good days. We have, BitDeer up double digits, 11%, TeraWolf 11%. This was this Wednesday. Iron up 9%. Riot 5%. Cleanspark 5%. Cypher 6%, right? We had across the board, every single Bitcoin miner green, several of them in the high single digits, some of them in the low double digits. So we do have good days. All the Bitcoin miners outperformed Bitcoin on this day, which has been a very rare occurrence in the last 150 days. But they do happen, and they can happen a lot stronger than this. So I just, as a glimmer of hope, this was this week. So, it's, if the Bitcoin miners were left for dead, they would not have rally days like this. This is reflective of the massive volatility that is in the Bitcoin miners. Go back so you can see, even with this giant up day, so with this huge up day, if we go back to the performance on the week, only HUT and Riot were up this week. All the rest of the Bitcoin miners were in the red this week. Bitcoin was down just 1%, so very modest action for Bitcoin. But some really bad weeks here. Marathon 6% down, Cleanspark 7% down, Bitfarms 9% down. That is a beat down. So, and I'm going to go to year to date because it doesn't get better. It gets worse. So year to date, here's what the Bitcoin miners have done. I mean, that's when I was using words at the beginning of the stream like catastrophic or disaster, right? Bitcoin's down 10% now this year. That's fine, and it's in the middle, we know, of a larger pullback. It did get as high as over 109,000. So from top to bottom, Bitcoin had almost precisely a 30% pullback so far. If we don't hit a lower low, this will have been almost a perfect 30% pullback. But it's 10% down from the beginning of the year. But you can see Cleanspark, which had an awful week, is still in first place. The best Bitcoin miners down 19% on the year. And then, Riot, the big market caps, Riot's down 22%, Marathon's down 26%, Iron's down 27%. And then we get into the high 30s, the 40s. HIVE is down 42% this year. TeraWolf's down 43% this year. BitDeer's down 54% this year. To put it in perspective, BitDeer did a $200 million stock buyback in this time frame, and they're still down 54% with buying $200 million of their own stock back. So, if you own BitDeer, this year's been a nightmare. Time for a new poll. Do you think the Bitcoin miner bull market is over? So very similar. Now this gets a little closer. Almost 40% of you think, and we got a lot of votes. Thank you so much for voting. Almost 40% of you think the bull market for the Bitcoin miners is over. That still leaves a majority, 60%, that thinks there's upside ahead. I am included in that group. I still think that the Bitcoin miners that I'm invested in, despite the fact that these are all in the deep red so far in 2025, it is still my opinion that, and I'll just go through and tell you guys which ones are. I own Cleanspark. It's down 19% this year. I own Riot. It's down 22% this year. I own Marathon. It's down 26% this year. I own Iron. It's down 27% this year. I own Bitfarms. It's down 32% this year. My holdings actually are at the top of the list, but it's still a nightmare, right? These are still awful numbers. And then I've recently started to build out a position in HIVE. So I have a small position here that I'm trying to potentially build out. And that's new. These positions I've had for a long time, particularly Bitfarms, Marathon, Riot, and Cleanspark. And the ones that I've dollar cost averaged in the most on by far are Cleanspark and Bitfarms. So I also hold I hold Bitcoin through the ETFs as well. So that's another Bitcoin position I have. So none of that's financial advice. I'm not telling you to buy any of those. I'm just letting you know what I'm doing for your information. How about you, George? What's your...
I don't even know anymore. Most of my holding is in crypto, whether it's in Bitcoin or XRP. That's really the only two.
I really feel like you nailed this one. You switched from Bitcoin miners to crypto at a very good time. In addition to that, so it's both things. You switched at the right time, but in addition to that, you had to listen to people for 3 years tell you what a dummy you were for holding XRP.
Yeah.
And, you've made a small fortune on XRP.
Yeah, it's... So, and someday, maybe I can be a bank.
Exactly. So this is the thing. Like, that buying and holding and dollar cost averaging that George did for years on XRP, you bought some of your XRP in the 30-cent range or under that. So
I think the lowest I got was 28 cents, Tom.
Right. So you continued to hold your conviction, dollar cost average in over multiple years. And then this is and much like much like the Bitcoin miners. And this is why you have to be careful getting in and out of these things. When they move, it's quick, right? All of a sudden, XRP, if we go to the XRP chart,
It moved.
okay, so here's the 1-day chart. From November 5th, go from November 10th to December 3rd. So that is less than a month, right? 3.5 weeks. This was up 433%. So had to wait 3 years for it. Had to listen to, I've been watching the comments, had to listen to people telling him he's an idiot and XRP's stupid. But 433% in 3 weeks, that's not stupid. And it ultimately went up over 500% in, 2 months. Now we've pulled back off of that high, but even now still, it's up 345%. I mean, that's what happens with these. But if you're trading in and out, or if you just feel like you've held too long and you feel like a fool because you think you've just, you're sick of waiting and you got to get out, right? All the people who got out right here, you know how badly they're kicking themselves and how mad they are, especially what about the people that held it all this time and then said, you know what, I just can't take it anymore. I'm getting out right here. And then bang, all those people go, that's just my life. That's my luck. The second I get out, it goes through the roof. It's like, no, you don't know when it's going to go through the roof. That's the case with these highly volatile assets. So, you gotta decide for yourself. But, if you think your fundamental thesis for investing hasn't changed, then that would be a reason to buy or hold or dollar cost average in. And if you think it has changed, obviously that would be a reason to sell and get out. So, both are true. Stories change on these things. Not every cryptocurrency, not every stock for every company has a story that just remains the same. It's a very, as George likes to say, it's a fluid situation. That's right. This is, and you got to be cognizant of that. So, I understand a lot of people are buying and selling, but what I hope is that, you're buying low and selling high. Or if you bought high, you dollar cost averaged yourself in. And I just hope people aren't selling things at the very bottom, because that tends to be what they convince retail investors to do. And if you look at all of these charts, none of these Bitcoin mining charts, I'm going to get off of the 1 week. They don't look good even on the 1 week. But I'm going to go to the 1 day. So here's Riot. I've got a blue line at $7.78. That line goes back to February of 2023. So, it has that. And again, technical analysis is an art, not a science. $7.78 is a very precise number. And it didn't, but this range has held very nicely. We closed above it today. So is Riot going through a bottoming out process? Riot on the daily RSI bounced off of being oversold several times here, right? And now all of a sudden we're on an upswing in the RSI. We had on the MACD a couple of days ago a bullish crossover. So in the short term, are we going to have, maybe it looks like we're going to have a little run for Riot. Now, if Bitcoin tanks, that may not happen, but there are so many days now that Bitcoin does one thing and the Bitcoin miners do the other. They're not following, a lot of days they're the same, but a lot of days they're different. They used to be much more almost precisely correlated. And we're not seeing that correlation. And I think that's on purpose to scare people out of this space. right? Now you can't count all the people who were comfortable in this space because they knew Bitcoin was going up. And if Bitcoin's going up, then the Bitcoin miners are going up. So no matter how bad things were, they knew that, they held that belief. But now a lot of people don't believe that anymore because they've seen Bitcoin go up and the Bitcoin miners go down. And, so that's a correlation that has broken many times. But ultimately, I do think, back to your question that I never really answered, George, which is where are these, what's it going to take for these to break out? I think the first thing is we got this whole area here in the $95,000 range. I think we got to break above that to end this bearish trend that we're in. So I think you'll start to see some serious movement there. And then, next, I think we got to take out our previous all-time high, which was at 109,000. So, I think there could be big runs from here to here. Number one, I think that there could be some big run-ups in the Bitcoin miners here. And then, wherever we're going, I think there can be, the upside is, the sky's the limit. Depends how high Bitcoin goes. Which is the poll that I'd like to do next, because I'd like to see this sentiment has changed dramatically over time. So let's do that poll. Do you think the Bitcoin miners bull market is over? 60-40 essentially say, no, it's not over. So now let's say, second. Okay. What will Bitcoin's new all-time high be in this cycle? So the first choice is 110K or less. Basically, we got to 109. For those who think the bull market's over, that's what you think. And then I put 150, 175,000, or $200,000 or higher. If enough people pick that, then we'll do another poll to see just how high people think we're going. But let's see, where do you guys think this bull market is going? Because optimism in October, November, December, optimism was on the rise. People were increasing their price targets. I was one of those. I came into this over a year and a half ago thinking we'd get to 150,000. And, then I eventually changed my target to 175,000. And I don't think I'm changing that. I know there's a lot of noise. The noise right now, it almost gives me more confidence. Because there will be an end to all this.
They really don't want us to have any money, Tom.
No, they don't. They want us to sell. They want us to sell and worse yet, then cry because we sold and everything spiked right after. I've done it. I mean, I'm talking, and I'm sure you guys have all done the same thing. I've held stocks for, I go back to my Microsoft. I held Microsoft for 4 or 5 years and it bounced between $25 and $30. So, somewhere, I'm going to go to the Microsoft chart. So I can't tell you the exact day that I sold, but somewhere in here, after holding it all this, no, not all that time, all this time, for all these years, I finally said, Microsoft is a monster. By the way, for most of those years, they were the biggest stock in the entire stock market. So I'm thinking they're bouncing between 25 and 30 bucks. They're the biggest stock in the entire stock market. They're just not going to ever go anywhere. I give up. That's it. So what happened in the years that followed? Up 1,500%. And that's from the largest company in the entire world. Is up 1,500%.
Then they started going nuts, right? That's when everything went nuts.
Right.
When things didn't make sense anymore.
So, this is an example. I've lived these examples. There's no fixed number. There's no point where you can say, well, it's been 4 years. Nothing takes more than 4 years. It's been 5 years. Nothing takes. You got to reassess, and there's obviously such a thing as being stubborn and just sunk cost holding on to something just because you've lost money in it at some point. If things have changed and it's a loser. I get it, but this is an example of something that went sideways for decades. I didn't hold it for decades. I held it for somewhere just under 5 years. But trust me, 5 years feels like you've held it forever. As a lot of you guys, I'm sure, know. Share your experiences. If you have any stocks that you held and held and held, and then you dumped, and then boom, you missed the gigantic run. I can tell you another one that happened to me very recently. And I don't understand the price action on this. And I'm not sad I sold it because I think it's overpriced beyond all belief, although a lot of people will tell you it's the best stock ever and it's going to keep going up forever.
What company's that?
Palantir.
Yeah, and that thing went nuts.
So this is another one. I didn't hold it very long, right? We're on the 1 month. Let's go to the 1 week. Right, this was down at 7, right? I was dollar cost averaging in along the bottom. And then it took a nice bump up, and then it just started going sideways again. And I said, you know what? I'm out. So it was a nice run, but you know what was a nicer run? What it did immediately after that, up 570%. So I'm kicking myself on that one. Right, I was too impatient. But I'll tell you the reason. Because I did not have conviction. Because I look at this company and I go, why? Why is this a $213 billion company when, if you look at their financials,
it still doesn't make sense.
Right? Let's see. Where's net income from operations? $300 million. And they're at $200 billion. And by the way, a year ago, they were making nothing. Right? They were losing money.
What do they do?
It's a software company.
No. What do they do? I understand. What software do they provide?
A lot of people are going to group it into AI software. It's protection security software. They started out basically having their entire customer base being, the military, but they segued into the private sector, and that has grown hugely. So this is a big growth company. But again, what's their price earnings? Their PE ratio is 478. That doesn't, I can't reconcile with that. I could see this company dropping 90% and still trading at what most people would consider fair value, right? Because it would be still almost a 50 PE ratio if it tanked 90% tomorrow. So I know there's a lot of people that are comfortable in this. A lot of people think this is the beginning of the run, and this is going to be one of the multi-trillion-dollar companies. And listen, maybe you're
Really?
right, but I don't see it. And I missed it. I missed a 500% run on this by getting out early. So
Dummy.
that can, well, listen, you win some, you lose some. We had a nice little, these are 15-minute candles.
My
So
20. This is David right there. My 20K Palatine is worth 113.
yeah, congratulations, Dave. That's for the people who did have conviction, however you got your conviction, whether it was because 5 YouTube people in a row told you to do it, or it's because you read the financial statements from cover to cover, however you got there, if you bought this and held through that run and made that kind of money, congratulations, you earned it. It is difficult to make money in the market, as you guys know, especially on these stocks that are super, super volatile. So, and then crypto is the way said, I used to own Palantir, but got tired staying around $28 to $30 and sold it. And now it's up 200%. So there's a lot of people with that story. I also snoozed on Palantir at Talkin Investing. You've talked about CleanSpark 50 million share dump at market. Have you talked about the CleanSpark 50 million share dump at market close? So I haven't talked about that, and I haven't checked their investor relations to see. I checked at about 3:45. So are you saying that they issued new shares? Because they did not have an at the market, or are you just saying that there was a lot of activity? Because we did talk about the fact that activity was extremely high, triple the normal activity on CleanSpark. But is this because when you say 50 million share dump, are you just saying somebody out there, a hedge fund or somebody? Let's look at the volume. Let's go.
That's a rough one if somebody got out.
Go to the 15-minute, because you can see this last candle of the day was the craziness, but let's add the volume. So boom, this candle. So yeah, something went bananas at the end of the day. So, anybody put in your theories, because CleanSpark does not have a shelf offering. So they didn't put out 50. They didn't dilute. They don't have a shelf offering. So somebody somewhere dumped big time at that. This is 15 minutes. Let's go down to 10 minutes. Still this one candle. What about 5 minutes? 2 candles. So somewhere in the last 10 minutes of the day, there was a monumental amount of volume. And if I do the 10-minute candle, looks like more volume. Yeah, there's more, equal to or more than the rest of the whole day combined. So I don't know. I don't know who did this or why they did it. I would buy this dip, if I was buying, but I don't buy after hours, and now it's the weekend. So I don't know what the answer is. I'd love to hear if anybody knows who or what or where, if there's any speculation going around out there.
That's crazy. Where's the low at CleanSpark? $4, was it?
I think 3. This guy, I think 374, but it might be $1.74.
I might have to DCA again.
Go to the 1 day and go to the lows of the crypto winter.
There was
Yeah,
something in the.
$1.74.
Why they got down that low?
Yep, $1.74. Now, that was in December of 2022. It took off in November of 2023 and had a huge run. Since then, the low was January of 2024, around $6.50. Hard for me to believe it's going to take out that low, but who knows, right? It was. I mean, HIVE is down here, but I mean, CleanSpark's gone from 5 exahash to 40 exahash, and they're on their way to 50 exahash in a year and a half. So this is a company that I do not see them plummeting down to those types of lows, unless somehow Bitcoin just absolutely crashes beyond anything I'm considering. Sour Melon Gaming. So congratulations. You mentioned you were going to do this. From trading my CleanSpark position, I have acquired a total of 9,436 free shares. Thank you, shorts, you bastards. So congratulations, Sour Melon. Sour Melon Gaming is a member, and you said I'm sick of sitting on the sidelines and just waiting. And it has paid, so it's paid off huge for you. Congratulations. That's awesome. Right, it's a quadruple witching day today, so that happens once a quarter. And today is that day. So who knows, maybe that had something to do with the massive, massive activity in the last 10 minutes of the day on CleanSpark. So Tim is saying, look at Mara's close. Well, let's take a look. Go to the 15-minute again. Here we go. I mean, if you look at the 15-minute, the biggest candle of the day by far was the last 15 minutes of the day. Let's see if it's the last. And once again, if I go down to 10 minutes, that was all the last 10 minutes of the day. We'll go to 5 and see if it splits. So the same thing. The last 10 minutes of the day, I don't know what to tell you. And if you look at this, massive volume going up and then massive volume going down. But massive volume at the end of the day. Let's look at them all. Huge volume. And it was 5 minutes of going straight up and 5 minutes of going straight down. That's Marathon, Riot, and CleanSpark. All did that. The two highest candles of the day, the two highest 5-minute candles of the day were the last 10 minutes of the trading day. For Marathon, Riot, and CleanSpark. Iron, same thing. Cores, not so much. Cypher, same thing. Is this Vanguard? Is this BlackRock? I mean, somebody, for it to be all of these companies in the last 10 minutes, and maybe it is because of the quadruple witching that happens once a quarter, which is 4 different options expiring. So, maybe that's what led to this unusual volume and unusually high volume in the last 10 minutes of the day. It is very strange. Somebody saying miners are a dead trade. And I know that there's a lot of people that think that. There's a lot of people who are done. They've given up. So let's see. What will Bitcoin's new all-time high be in this cycle? I'll tell you what the people said, George, and then you can I'd like to hear your number now, whether you've adjusted or not. So 110,000 or less, meaning essentially we have already peaked and the bull market is over. 25%. So that's consistent with the poll. 150,000, 38%. 175,000, 15%. And $200,000 or higher, 22%. So a little bit of a spread there, but coming in first place was 150,000 at 38%, but 74%, because it just changed a little because because somebody else voted. 74% think it's going to get to at least $150,000 in this bull market cycle. And my new number is 175, and I'm sticking with it. What do you think, George? What's your crystal ball? And again, obviously, who knows? We're all
no crystal ball. I said 175. I think things are going to get really interesting for Bitcoin.
In what time frame?
I think people are not really paying attention to what's happening. When I say about China and Bitcoin and the reserve, they're going to go nuts at some point in time.
So you're saying
demand's going to get crazy. Yeah.
Right.
And it's just somebody's going to get screwed up on a trade, and then they're going to stop doing this, making the $5,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When it goes the wrong way.
Yep. They're going to get screwed up, and then bam, before you know it, it's over with.
And when it runs. And to that point, some Pogo, who was a member, thanks for being a member, pointed out HUT 8 went up in the last 10 to 20 minutes. So this is the 5-minute HUT 8 chart. And look at the volume in the last 10 minutes, but the last 4 candles in a row, green, 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 green. I mean, this was 2.5% move, but you can see it's the big move on the day, and it's most of the volume on the day. So yeah, I think this last 10 minutes of this day, and it probably is all the options expiring, made all of these stocks go bananas. So maybe a return to some more normal behavior next week. I want to get to just a couple of good news items because talk about all the bad stuff. Find the tab. So actually, before I look at that one, I want to look at this one. Okay, so the Bitcoin ETFs, and then I actually want to look at something before that. So this article came out a few days ago. U.S. Bitcoin ETFs shed $5.5 billion in the longest run of outflows. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row where Bitcoin had outflows. You can see the ETFs are only a year old, so it's not like there's a massive history here, but that has never happened before. One of these weeks was a monumental outflow, and that was 5 weeks in a row of outflow. And here's why I think we may be really, really in. There's a lot of things telling me we're bottoming out. And that can take, 2 to 4 weeks. So when, we say we're bottoming out, I'm not calling the bottom today. I don't know when it is, but I'm going to show you after this article with this historic 5 week of outflows. If you look at what the Bitcoin ETFs did this week, Monday, $274 million inflow. Tuesday, $209 million inflow. Wednesday, $11.8 million inflow. Thursday, $165.7 million inflow. And I would expect today they'll round out the week and close it out with a 5 for 5, all inflows. So that 5 weeks of outflows, that $5.5 billion that left the ETFs, which is a part of, what we just looked at, the pullback we've had over the last month, it would appear we've turned a corner with the ETFs, and they are now buying. BlackRock bought $172 million worth of Bitcoin on Thursday. $218 million on Tuesday. So, some of these are signals. This is a forecast. After 5 weeks in a row of massive outflows, we're going to have a week of very nice inflows. We may have $700,000 or $800,000 or $1 million of inflows this week into the Bitcoin ETF. So I think this is a good signal that we're in the bottoming out process. Then just a couple things super quick. SEC earnest about finding workable crypto policy, commissioners say at the roundtable. So we have this is a new SEC. By the way, I don't remember if it was last Friday or Tuesday on the live stream. I said XRP rejected. So they were fined $2 billion. The SEC agreed to settle that for $100 million. And XRP said, no thanks. So guess what happened? The SEC dropped the case altogether and they owe zero. So that's how much sentiment has changed. And they knew there's a new administration. Gary Gensler's gone. So he knew, no, I don't even need, forget giving $2 billion. I don't even need to give them $100 million because this lawsuit was frivolous to begin with. They've dropped all the other lawsuits. Drop ours. And they did the next day. So this is where I'm saying positive catalysts. And this is one of many. You know, they dropped the Coinbase. They've been getting rid of, you know, there was an assault on crypto exchanges and cryptocurrencies. And then this happened. And they've been waiting for this. This might not sound like a big deal, but this is something they've been waiting for. U.S. bank agency cuts, quote, reputational risk from exams after crypto sector cites issues. So the crypto industry argued that the U.S. regulators used the idea of risks to banks' reputation to pressure them to reject digital asset clients. So one of the factors they were using was, is this client you're going to take on, is it going to damage your reputation being associated with, you know, and this is a, you know, FTX, let's use FTX as an example, because obviously that was a horrible association. But how about Coinbase, right? They're a digital asset, but, you know, are we going to not bank with Coinbase because it's going to be bad for our reputation? Well, now we see the OCC is removing that factor from its supervision handbook, the agency said on Thursday. So the U.S. national banks have been told by the Office of the Comptroller of Currency that they'll no longer have to answer how controversial customers might damage their reputations, a point that had been criticized by crypto companies and insiders, arguing it has contributed to them being debanked. And you guys know we've been talking about debanking. The whole debanking of anything touching cryptocurrency was real. That's not disappearing. It just disappeared. It's gone. It's out of the handbook. They no longer have to consider this at all. So this is what I'm saying. Domino after domino after domino is falling. Good things happening for cryptocurrency. In the meantime, the headlines are scaring the heck out of everybody and they're suppressing the prices. That's my opinion. That's what it looks like is happening to me. And, you know, these are the types of real, actual actions that are happening that I think support that argument. What do you think, George? Any thoughts? Any final thoughts?
Just gotta wait for it. DCA, pretend like you're Michael Saylor.
That's nobody's more all in than he is. So that's what happened this week. This was another tough week. It's been a frustrating 2025. I know, but I hope everybody can hang in there. And for the members, we will see you on Tuesday. Maybe next week we'll get a reversal. We've had 3 weeks in a row where Monday and Tuesday were awful. Let's see if we've turned the corner. So, and for everybody else, we are here every Friday. So you can visit us every Friday after the market closes. And on the way out, you can smash the like button. I'd like to thank everybody. We did get over 100 likes, so that is much appreciated. Have a great weekend, everybody. George, thank you very much.
Have a good day.
All right. Good night.
You too.